This video is sponsored by Fantic. One model that I have always coveted but never managed to get my hands on is the old Chaplain Venerable Dreadnought. I remember seeing this sucker on the old Games Workshop website and in my heavily water damaged copy of the old Forge World catalog. It's such a cool miniature and it's so perfect for the Black Templars. We love our chaplains, and the idea of a chaplain who has fallen in combat but not quite dead being entombed in sarcophagus dreadnought armor. Oh, it's so cool. Now, as much as I want that model, I kinda don't want it anymore because in 2017, with the release of the new Redemptor Dreadnought, the Primaris Dreadnought, everything kinda changed. I love the classic box knot, but there is something for the bigger, badder, better Dreadnought, and I kinda don't want the puny little resin guy anymore. He just wouldn't work. Even if I put him on the appropriate base, he would just be this little nugget in comparison to what a Redemptor Dreadnought is. My desire for a Chaplain Dreadnought has never waned. If anything, over the years, it's only gotten stronger. And through our creation, the Honored Casket, I will see this dream realized and make it available on EonsOfBattle.com. We created these bits, these cybernetic components, to upgrade a walking tank into a living shrine. This will fix every problem I have with the Redemptor kit and make my perfect Dreadnought. Putting together the Redemptor Dreadnought kit, even since 2017, Warhammer has come a long way with their engineering. This kit leaves a little bit to be desired with its fit and finish. Everything works, it just needs a little extra TLC to get it working properly. I built up the body of this thing, minus the sarcophagus face, and the big old pot belly that this kit typically has. I'll be replacing those sections later. I stuck on the power plant, and then after that the boob guns, and pro tip, follow the instructions. I did, and it turns out that these have to go on first. Luckily, I was able to grind down the connection with my Fantic F2 Master Rotary tool, and this let them slide into place. Crisis averted. For this weapon hardpoint, there is the option between Twin Stormbolter or a Fragstorm grenade launcher. The Stormbolter does a guaranteed 2 to 4 shots, where the frag grenades can be 1 up to 10 shots with blast, so I decided to go with the frag. Then for his fist, this massive power weapon gets a weapon option too. This one is similarly unimpressive. Heavy Flamer or Onslaught Gatling Cannon. I think the cannon just inches past a Flamer in damage, so I decided to go with this one, cleaning it up and then tucking it right underneath his arm. For right now, I'll leave these fingers off. There is some posability and I want to see him standing before I make anything permanent. For his right arm, this is where the real juice of a weapon sits. I can have either the Heavy Onslaught Gatling Cannon, which sucks, or the Macroplasma Incinerator. This is a beautiful Megaplasma, long range, D6+1 shots blast with strength 9, AP-4, damage 3 when you overcharge. I love this gun, and I can think of just a few ways I can make it visually better. It has these jowls underneath the barrel that usually have a seam. I glued these on so that there wasn't one, using my Tamiya plastic putty thinned down with some plastic glue to make the gap vanish. Then I mixed up a batch of Greenaput, which is 50% green stuff, 50% Milliput. This gives me the best of both worlds, and I use this to fill the gap that I made underneath the gun. Then to give it a little bit more pizzazz, I decided to do some cables. I bought this hose and tentacle maker from Green Stuff World, and it's designed to take some snakes of clay, and when you roll them in between, it leaves behind a rib texture. Once that's on there, I can flip one of the texture panels over to the flat side and unroll it again to mush these ribs down into flat sections that are the perfect match for the techie tubes that are already on the blaster. I measured these and they came out to about 2mm, which should be perfect for stringing them out of the jowls of the plasma blaster. On these little power cells, I tried drilling some 2mm holes, but I got a little bit greedy trying to drill 3 holes that are too big to go here. So instead I switched to a carving bit and I carved out the inside of each socket. Then I very carefully drilled out the gills using my Fantic rotary tool to carefully carve away the inside without touching the surrounding armor. Going slow, I was able to perfectly grind it away and using a little bit of plastic glue to melt away all the fuzzy little crumbs. This was a tricky operation, but made easy with help from today's sponsor, Fantic. Hobbying all day creates a lot of little messes that all pile up on my desk, but with the new V8 Apex, a handheld vacuum cleaner from Fantic, it sucks up all these messy leftovers in a jiffy. This handheld tool is the perfect quick cleaner that I grab many times a day. The tool is lightweight, only about a pound. I've got miniatures that weigh more than this thing. And lightweight doesn't mean underpowered. This vacuum has sucked up every problem I've thrown at it. It charges up in 2.5 hours, and it's nice and small so it can sit with all my other tools and my hobby toolkit just fine. And that's not the only Fantic machine on my desk. I received their cordless rotary tool last year and it's become a staple of my hobby loadout. It's compact, lightweight, and the perfect tool for all the little niche hobby jobs that need some serious precision. It's been great from everything from carving, grinding, sanding, and much, much more. Another staple is the K2 Nano, a cordless drill tool that is compact and powerful, specifically designed for drilling through resin, plastic, wood, and more with ease. It's made pinning feet and drilling out gun barrels an absolute breeze. These are all the perfect tools for hobbying: lightweight, compact, long-lasting, and powerful enough for all the hobbying challenges you'll face. If you're interested in getting these hobby tools for yourself, you can use the code up on screen now. Follow the link in the description to get these at the best possible price. Using the codes will get you 10 to 14% off the already hefty discount for almost half off if you use both codes. You don't want to miss out on a deal like that, so follow the link in the description to get your tools today. Now it's all ready for the wires. I clipped these flat and then stuck them down with a little bit of super glue. I put all 3 whiskers on first and then one by one bent and trimmed them to go back into the power packs. Right now they're still very soft, so I took some very thin copper wire and I used this to carefully bind the wires together, so that as they finish curing they'll be in the right shape and harden exactly how I want. I did the same on the other side and then wrapped another wire right around the whole gun, pinning the wires in place. After a little cable management, my gun is ready for action. My Dreadnought is rapidly taking form, and I think that there's 2 big reasons why Dreadnoughts are one of the most beloved things in the annals of Warhammer 40,000. Number 1, the lore. The idea of a nearly dead Space Marine being scraped off the battlefield and then shoved into a walking tank where they become an immortal engine of death, and that this isn't horrifying but the greatest honor, is incredibly evocative and grim dark. The second reason that Dreadnoughts are so beloved by the fans of Warhammer 40,000 is, I think, the history of what Dreadnoughts are in the game. Back in the day, like 4th, 5th, 6th, maybe 7th edition 40k, the supposed good old days, Warhammer 40,000 was a lot more boring. If you were playing Space Marines, it didn't really matter what color you painted your guys, you were playing with the exact same miniatures as everybody else. It wasn't like it is today, where every different color of Space Marines have their own different interesting units that are specific to them. And even if you're playing a vanilla Space Marine, you still have access to like Phobos and Gravis and just like all of the different ways and different units that can make your army unique. It all kind of just came down to the Dreadnoughts. These walking coffins were a big blank canvas for you to pour your chapter's heraldry onto. And if you hopped on over to Forge World, you can even buy a Dreadnought sarcophagus that was specifically bedazzled for your color of Space Marines. If you look online at people's Dreadnoughts, you almost never see a bog standard one. Every single time you'll see something weird being done to make it that specific chapter's Dreadnought. A lot of units are shared between the different Space Marine chapters, the bikes, land speeders, land raiders, rhinos, but I feel like the Dreadnought is the one where people go hard on it. People aren't content to just paint this a color and slap a decal on there and call it done. I have seen so many awesome Dreadnoughts, and I hope that this guy will soon be joining the ranks. I now have all the parts I want from the Games Workshop kit. It's time to add the Honored Casket. I glued on the skull helm, which fits perfectly over the front plate of the Dread. Then for either side, these wings stick on right over the Dread armor. I used my rotary tool to clean off the print marks and then stuck it down, and it's pretty transformative, the change from the classic Redemptor face to this. We spent a lot of time making sure that all these parts fit perfectly, and now it's all coming together. I glued the Vox speaker over his head, and then the iron halo stretching from one shoulder to the other. That's the torso all taken care of, now for the legs. And the Redemptor Dreadnought legs have always been a pet peeve of mine. I don't like them, so I'm not going to use them. I broke out a 90mm cobalt keep base and then set my custom legs in place, thinking about what I want to see. Then I glued down some thick 1/2 inch cork, and I used my little handsaw to carve this on an angle, using my handy little vacuum to clean my desk in between cuts. I added a second piece of cork so that my Dread is wandering through a valley in the rocky desert wasteland that I set my Black Templars in. I used a paint marker to outline where I want his feet to go, and then I took some pine bark nuggets and I fitted these into the cork using my Fantic rotary tool to make some space for these. After I had most of the surface covered in these bits, I mixed up some milliput and I shoved this where the wood met the cork. I smushed it flush with my fingers, then I took a piece of cork and I pressed it into the wet putty to leave behind a cork texture, so it was all seamless and natural. Then I poured out some wood glue and got to work covering the base with some small pebbles, coarse grained sand, and then fine grained sand. My base is all textured and I glued down his big old feet with some thick super glue. One thing I don't like about the true Redemptor feet is that they are very dainty. Not so with these. I used my rotary tool to clean up the ankles and hips, getting them all ready for posing. I mixed up some green stuff and I smushed this into the joints. This putty will give me some wiggle room to push and pull my Dread's legs into position before they're permanently glued. I shoved his thighs into his hips, and then with a little bit more green stuff, I dry fitted the knees, giving them a nice walking pose, making a mid-stride. Once I was happy with the pose, I used some thick super glue to glue the knees, and his legs are all done and ready for him to stand. I snuck a couple of little orc skulls onto his base. These are the skulls of Nyx orcs who have died in our 200-year-long crusade. Then looking at my Dread with his torso stuck on, he's sitting a little low. I want a spacer, and the hip from his old leg is actually the perfect size for his waist. I cut off the leg, then cut this in half, and then I glued it right on, and it fits perfectly. Then I drilled a 2mm hole with my Fantic K2 nano drill to make a pin to hold them all together. I almost lost the pin in his butt, but I was able to fish it back out. This ended up working perfectly, and now I have the other half ready for when I'm building my second Dreadnought. Now he's coming along, but I want to add some decoration. One thing I've discovered is regular small purity seals look really bad on vehicles, they're just too small. So I took some of our EonsOfBattle bits from the Armored Accessories bits pack, and glued these on so I can have some decorations with mass. I glued more of these onto the wings, each wing got one seal and one shield. Then for the Liqerise rocket pod, instead of gluing it right behind his head, I made it off to the side. Instead, I want a banner to take its place. This is one of Great Height Studios' bits, Eternal Crusader's banner, and is available from EonsOfBattle.com. To turn this into a freestanding banner, I sawed off the arm. Then I used my rotary tool to grind away the hand. I used my Fantic V8 Apex vacuum in tandem with my rotary tool to suck up the resin dust. Then I took some plastic tubing and I drilled it out the same diameter as the handle of the banner. I clipped this to size, and then I had to figure out a way to attach it. I found the knee joint from his old leg fits perfectly in this spot, so I cut it off, and this is where I'm going to hide the magnet. I drilled a 4mm hole into the plastic and then got to work figuring out how to get a magnet onto the plastic hard tube. I used a name tag sticker to bulk up the width of my tubing so that I could shove it into a thicker length that I could accept the 4mm by 3mm magnet. Once that was in place, I glued it all together and it worked perfectly. I really wanted a magnet on here so that even if I bump the banner, it'll just collapse and spring back rather than snap. I stuck together the rest of my fella and gave him a once over, seeing if there was anything else I could add. I glued some more big purity seals and shields to his shoulders, and now he's ready for action. My new knot is standing and it is looking phenomenal. I remember my first ever Dreadnought, which has been lost to time, and that is the Assault on Black Reach Dreadnought. But I do have my second ever Dreadnought, an old Venerable Dreadnought, and I do love this guy, but comparing it to the new model, it is shockingly too small. Honestly, it was way too small back in the day. Games Workshop and scaling has been a wild ride for the entire history of Warhammer 40,000. Usually vehicles were kind of like scaled down to about half what they really would be in lore. Like rhinos are teeny tiny, even Land Raiders are pretty small compared to probably what they should be. And the little Dreadnought, this is just unacceptable these days. The new Dreadnought, the Redemptor Dreadnought, is in my opinion pretty darn close to perfect. It's big, it's impressive, it looks really good alongside modern miniatures, and just the few little things that I didn't love about it are now fixed. I don't like the pot belly, and so that's gone, and the little wimpy baby legs with the weakest little toothpick ankles have been replaced with big, heavy looking steel. This guy is epic, and I can't wait to see what he looks like all painted up. I added some last minute texture to his toesies, brushed on some texture paste, and then I hit everything with a black prime. Then I put some white ink into my airbrush and I did a zenithal. Even though he's a vehicle, he's kinda still a guy, and the zenithal did a great job of giving me my highlights and shadows. Now for the Templar soup. This is a mix of Games Workshop contrast, Black Templar, Leviathan Blue, and Lamian Medium. I put this into my airbrush and I spray this on to tint him the same dark blue-black color as the rest of my army. The more I spray this, the darker my mini gets, so there's just a ghost of gray on the top-facing parts of him. After these airbrush layers, I hit him with the satin varnish and finally broke out a paintbrush. I gave him a dry brushing of wolf gray. This is a blue-gray color that works well to edge highlight my Black Templar armor. Now that's all the armor taken care of, and he's kinda done. It's always weird when I get to this stage. So much of the model is done, it's just picking out every single little detail to paint a color. For his knees, I made these split in half, red on one side and then black and white checker on the other. My inspiration was from the Joy Toy Black Templar Redemptor Dreadnought action figure. On the other side, I painted it white for a more classic Templar look. Then it was time to start loading up the decals. Maybe it was fate, but I love decals, and my favorite Space Marines, the Black Templars, have always gotten the most decals of any Space Marine chapter in 40k. A little bit of white chain, a Black Templar cross, a little campaign badge, and on the back of his chassis, a little sergeant badge. I'm sure I'll think of more decals later, but for now I'm moving on, giving these spots a satin varnish to protect the decals, and then painting on some paint chips over the decal work. Looking at the legs, they're a little bland. That tends to happen when 90% of a Templar's model are just black, so I decided to force some more detail on there. I took my drill with a 2mm drill bit and I made some craters. Then I took Tamiya basic putty and I started to fill up each hole. I took the round back end of a paintbrush and I smooshed out the putty. This makes a little lip like the armor here was hit so hard it displaced the metal. Now I can paint these spots. No primer or anything needed, I can just start painting. I took Darkwood speed paint and I blasted each crater until they looked burnt. Then I gave these spots a dry brushing of silver. Now the legs are looking a lot more interesting. Moving to his body, I took desert yellow and I base coated all the gold stuff, the wings, the iron halo, his little neck, and then I washed all these spots with dark wood speed paint. Once that was dry, I gave these spots a dry brushing of desert yellow, focusing on the top corners of the wings and the middle of the crown. Then I did another layer of dry brushing with demonic yellow. All of these dry brushes built up my highlights, and now to give it that shine, I used Vallejo bright greenish gold. This is a pretty thin paint that lets the underpainting shine through. Then I did just a little dusting of Mithril Blade Silver over the very top shiniest spots. Now onto the next bit, the decorations. I painted the inside parts white and red, and the outside I glazed from dark red on the bottom to bright red on top. Once I had them all painted, it was time for more decals. I put an Imperial Fist on the shoulder, some more chains, and basically just loaded up every little decal I had until there was no room left on the shields. Then for the shoulders, these got big old Templar crosses. I feel like when decals get too big, it starts to look like a sticker. To add some realism, I took my Templar soup and I sprayed the bottom half of the decals to add a shadow. Then I took white paint and I outlined the symbol to give them some dimensionality and make them look more real. That's another thing taken care of. Now for the man himself. I put noble skin over his tubes, giving these a dry brushing of more Mithril Blade to get some shine. Then for the bones, I started with bony matter. This is my go-to for bone, but he's a little bit dark from the Templar soup overspray, so this really had trouble cutting through. Instead, I made myself a mix of desert yellow, black, bony spikes, and then white for the final highlights. Desert yellow mixed with black turns into a greenish color. Then it brightens up with bony spikes to make it a nice bone color that looks very different from the surrounding gold and blue-black armor. After some of my dark greenish gray, I highlighted up through pure bony spike to white paint until his bones were looking perfect. Then for the spooky eye, I took some red ink into my airbrush and I sprayed this on so it spilled onto the surrounding area. Then I painted the eye, starting with a black base coat and then building up layers so that it was shiny red on the bottom and then black on top. This is the classic way to do 40k lenses and gems, finishing it off with 2 little dots of white paint on top. That's another thing done. Now for his boob grenades. I base coated these in white, then carefully put a big blob of red in the middle of each warhead, then a smaller dot of white so that these are banded. Then for his missile launcher, I glazed yellows and oranges until it was ultra bright yellow, then the missiles got red paint. That's the torso of my dread all done. I mixed up some green stuff and I shoved it into his waist, connecting him top to bottom. My dreadnought is now standing tall, very tall. This guy is awesome. Typically I don't enjoy painting vehicles, but this really isn't a vehicle, it's a guy. Factually, it is a guy. And another thing that makes him just a regular guy is he can go in transports. There's one transport in the game, the big ol' Space Marine flyer, the Storm Raven gunship, a vehicle that is about the same size and shape as the box that the Big Mac comes in. It can transport 12 regular Astartes infantry and 1 dreadnought. Somehow, the Storm Raven gunship can take one of these suckers. I think it's kind of meant to be hanging off the back, but clearly this thing is most of the size of a Storm Raven gunship, but it can be done. I kind of do want one of those. It would be really fun. They're almost 300 points in game and not really worth it, but it might be worth it for the meme of flying around a dreadnought. This guy is shaping up to be everything I've ever wanted in a dreadnought, and I haven't even gotten to the best parts yet. His Macroplasma Incinerator and his big ol' Redemptor Fist with the attached Onslaught Gatling Cannon. This guy, he's not really a squad wiper, he's just a really solid unit. Very tough, very tanky, and absolutely nothing in the game wants to get shot or punched by these weapons. Starting with his fist, the Gatling barrel and bits got hit with some noble skin to make them darker and warmer compared to the armor, then a little dry brushing of silver, then to do a little storytelling through decals. Black Templars chain their weapons to themselves in honor of the first Marshal Sigismund, and I think it'd be cool for this to be represented on this dread as well. And you know where else you can find some amazing storytelling? That's right, our website. On EonsOfBattle.com, we're all restocked on our excellent hobby goodies: Gamer's Grass Tufts, Great Height Studio Bits for your Space Marines, Armor Painter paints, brushes, basing cork, ultra thin and ultra thick super glue, and we've got terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit good for any one terrain pack I've ever made or the brand new one. This June, we have created the Ramshackle Bits pack. This set is full of improvised armor to enhance your vehicles with massive treads, extra armor, rotating cannons, machine gun turrets, and little goblin gunners, including a bunch of little goblins to help keep all of this upgraded equipment running smoothly. Don't let the shoddy construction fool you, these bits are still plenty lethal, able to sling lead and crush foes under tread. This set also comes with a series of basing bits to litter your wasteland and is available at EonsOfBattle.com. After the decals, I mixed some wolf gray with black and I did a little sponging to add some rough texture to the armor, then a sponging of silver. Then I took some panel liner and I dripped it into the cracks to add some more contrast to his armor digits. I did the same weathering pattern on the rest of the dread, a little bit of my wolf gray mix, stamped and then some silver paint. After the sponging, I used my brush to connect some of the chips into larger scratches. That's the left arm done, time for the right.
I painted 3/4 of his plasma with 2 coats of noble skin to get it darker, then a dry brushing of silver paint. I left the nose unpainted in preparation for some hot rod flames. In a lot of Old Templars artwork, these squiggly yellow flames appear all the time, so I freehanded these on with some gray paint to cover the noble skin, then yellow paint, doing layer after layer after layer, working in some oranges in the recesses to get it looking perfect. Once the nose was looking fiery, I sponged and brushed on a little gunmetal for paint chips, and then for the glowing plasma coils, I used my airbrush to paint these white. I also dusted this into the body as well to start doing some object source lighting. Then I hit these spots with some satin varnish to protect the ink layers, and then I sprayed on some Raging Sea speed paint. And I put this on the body too. Then I brushed on some Raging Sea onto the plasma coils, and his left hand is now perfected. He's nearing completion, the only thing left is the banner. This has a bunch of lovely raised texture, but I want to keep it simple. Red for the cloth, black for the Templar cross, and then white for the trim. I worked in layers of red, getting it bright on top and then dark on the bottom. And I worked carefully, leaving the zenithal intact, so I had to do very little highlighting on the trim and design. Then I finished off the top of the banner with noble skin on all the metal, my desert yellow recipe on the bones, then for the candles, holy white, with just little candle flicker flames in yellow. I snapped this into place and he's all painted, only the base is left. My Templar bases are Vallejo Earth and Pro Acryl Olive Flesh. I put super watered down Vallejo Earth into my airbrush and I sprayed this onto the ground, letting it splash onto his toes and lower legs. Then I did a dry brushing of Olive Flesh, and I used too small of a dry brush, which left me with a patchy ground. I sprayed a little bit more noble skin to darken and desaturate the ground, and then I re-dry brushed with my biggest dry brush, pressing the bristles into all the nooks and crannies. Finally, at long last, I painted the rim of the base black. I'm kinda glad I never got my hands on that real Chaplain Dreadnought. It kept the desire alive to one day become this.
You know what this guy looks like? He looks like the Emperor sat upon the golden throne, a tiny sliver of his power made manifest as a death machine on the battlefield. This guy is epic. This is actually not my first Redemptor Dreadnought. I guess it's my third technically because I have a Ballistus. But my first Redemptor Dreadnought I painted up when the kit first came out, and boy has my Black Templar scheme evolved a lot since those days. It's fine, but it has all of the problems. It's got the pot belly, it's got the little tiny baby feet. The new version, my version, is so much better. Oh. It barely looks like the same model, even though it's literally the same model. The Redemptor 2.0. I don't take this guy in a lot of games. Just not, its paint job is not up to snuff. Maybe one of these days I'll have to snap this guy off with the little legs and replace it with the Honored Casket, because man, beefing up those legs does a lot to make this a lot more impressive. If you guys like the look of these bits, the Honored Casket is available at EonsOfBattle.com. And now that I have painted up a Dreadnought, a proper Dreadnought that is going to be the flagship of my Black Templar Crusade, all I can think about is how I would do up some more. I think I want one more regular Redemptor, and then I definitely need a pair of Brutalises, and probably one more Ballistus. I have some thoughts on the Ballistus, but I need to let those settle a little bit. For right now, I am feeling the Dreadnought. Thanks for watching.